Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head coming back from goal line framing. Captain Dave is here. And during the break, if you're a Gamecock fan and you're concerned about Saturday, it's a guaranteed win on Saturday. That's what Dave told me. So, Dave, how does this go that South Carolina is guaranteed to beat Ole Miss Saturday? You got to turn your mic on there, Dave.
Wrong mic. I look back in history, and when I was at USC, I attended 3 Gamecock Ole Miss games.
Okay.
They were 1976, we won 10-7. 1978, 18-17, and 79, 21-14. So I guarantee that if I'm there, we win.
So you'll be there Saturday.
I will.
That's what you're telling me. I mean, if you're telling me all this, it means you're going to be there.
Unfortunately, I have to be here.
So you're telling me, is this your way of trying to get out of working and going to the game by saying, look, Tara, if I'm there, USC wins?
I will search the history of everything to find some way to get out of work.
Well, you started now with this little weasel thing you brought up.
Yeah.
That every time you go to an Ole Miss South Carolina game, Carolina wins.
I think I'm a lucky talisman or whatever you call it.
So you're telling me that you should be there Saturday, which means you can't be here.
Absolutely. I shouldn't go to any Duke South Carolina games, though, because I went to that one. We lost 27-14.
So basically, this is your way to get out of doing your typical Saturday marathon on the board. So you would sacrifice working here all day to go to the Carolina game?
I believe I would, yeah.
You're a heck of a man, Dave. Sacrifice you make.
I'll be happy to attend anyone's tailgate party that's listening.
Just to help South Carolina win. So there we go. Guaranteed win of Dave. The human good luck charm is at Williams-Brice on Saturday. All right. Where's my paper? Dow Loggins, speaking of the media yesterday, Dow was talking about what has improved offensively after 4 games. Cut 2, Dave. Hit it.
We've done what we need to do 3 times, and 1 time we didn't. And our goal is to score more points than the opponent. No, I'm not a stat guy. I don't care about stats. I don't look at stats. I don't know anything other than that. I think that there's been areas, I think we played to our strengths as an offense. We're running the ball better than we did in the past here, and it's because of the players we have. I also think it helps when you have 2 athletic quarterbacks. There's definitely areas of improvement, but all of our focus right now is on Ole Miss and making sure that we continue to play to our players' strengths.
There you go. I love Dow because he's a very friendly man, and he's a good storyteller, and he's got a good personality, and he tells you nothing. Like right there. Got to score more points than the other team. 3 times it's worked, 1 time it hasn't. To me, again, just watching games like you do, I think that they have made improvements in the passing game. I think we saw what the run game could be in the last 2 contests. We saw with the quarterback, especially with Robbie Ashford in the Akron game, and before that, watching Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers run through LSU. So we've seen in, especially these last 2 contests, what this run game could possibly be moving forward. And I think we have seen the passing game improve. I think the receivers have gotten better. They still have to get better. Lenore Sellers has to get better. I liked how Dow has been scheming guys open a bit here recently, especially in the Kentucky game. I mean, you could see it watching the broadcast. So I think there are things getting better on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line has to improve still. The tackle spots are a problem. We knew Josiah Thompson was going to be a guy that was going to have his good moments and bad moments as a freshman. We accepted the fact that he's going to be in peak and valley mode the whole year, right? Casey Henry's struggles, I'm not going to say it's a surprise because, again, Casey Henry was an unproven guy coming in this year. He had started 1 more game than Josiah Thompson. He's just been in the program for 3 years. But Casey Henry's really struggled to tackle. And Kamar Bell has had good moments, bad moments, good moments. It's been very inconsistent for Bell. You were hoping he would be more consistently good, and he hasn't been. Rashawn Lee's been a rocket center, and Torricelli Simpkins has probably been the best all-around offensive lineman, especially in pass protection. Simpkins' pass blocking grades really good, eye test good. So the offensive line, it's better than it was last year, low bar, but it still has to take another leap for this offense to truly have the opportunity to be as good as we hope it could be. Once again, we're talking about the offensive line, but it is better than it was last year, to be fair. To be fair. All right, now let's get to Clayton White. And Clayton, let's focus in on cut 11. Clayton talking about what Kentucky did last week against Ole Miss, because Kentucky did a really nice job taking away the explosive plays in the passing game down the field. Don't get me wrong. Harris, their big-time wide receiver, had like 121 yak yards in the loss to Kentucky. But Jackson Dart was 1 for 7 in throws, 20-plus yards. Dart was pressured on about 37% of his dropbacks. Matter of fact, though, Dart, if you look at the breakdown against pressure, was really good. But he was pressured on about 39% of his dropbacks. Ole Miss, as a team, they were only accumulating about 1.5 yards before contact in the run game. Basically, Kentucky's defense did their job, and Kentucky's offense kept the ball for 39 minutes and scored points. So here is Clayton White talking about the good stuff that the Kentucky defense did last year, cut 11.
Obviously, it wasn't just the defense. It was obviously a team effort, and how the game plan that Kentucky came up with was worked to almost perfection in regards of keeping Ole Miss off the field and on offense. And they converted on third down on offense, obviously, and then obviously on defense, I thought they did a really good job of just playing aggressive, playing coverage, and make sure they just where they're supposed to be at. They did a really good job of the pass rush, and they tackle well. Those are the keys.
Yeah, the tackling is a thing. And, because, again, Ole Miss, they attack all the quadrants of the field on offense. That's why they're a really good offense. And you got to tackle them. Because whether they're throwing the ball, at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage, between 0 and 9, getting all these things, yak yards, Ole Miss is set up to make you pay if you miss tackles. So you got to tackle. South Carolina, for 3 games combined, almost had as many missed tackles they did in the LSU game by themselves. You got to tackle them. You got to wrap them. Don't worry about being on SportsCenter with some hero hit. Grab dudes, wrap them up, get them to the ground old school.
Well, that's what's concerning is you're facing an Ole Miss team that is athletic and is skilled, much like an LSU team that, did make you pay by making you miss a lot of tackles, and certainly hope that's something that's been cleaned up in the week since, certainly with the bye week last week, where you can kind of get back to focusing on the fundamentals and the basics of some of those kind of things that kind of get lost in the middle of the season. But I can guarantee you, if you miss 17 tackles on Saturday, you probably aren't going to win this game.
You're in trouble. You're in trouble. Guess what? You miss 17 tackles. That's a lot of Ole Miss touchdown celebrations.
Yes, it is.
Because that's the way they're just built. No offense to LSU. LSU, as good as they are, and look, LSU's got talent on offense. And their quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, has had a really nice season so far, his first year as a starter. But the LSU offense is not the Ole Miss offense. You missed tackles against LSU, and they gained yards, and they, made some explosive plays. You miss tackles against Ole Miss, they're in the end zone. That's the difference in this thing. So you've got to wrap them up and tackle them. Absolutely. There's a couple other things, too, to look at that we're going to get into in the next segment.
Talking to our guy.
Oh, we got our guy coming up. Stephen Willis is, what's it called?
From Locked On Ole Miss.
Locked On Ole Miss. And we're also in this hour, or if not in this hour, top of the one, couple things to look at in this game with Ole Miss and South Carolina. Maybe South Carolina can take advantage of some stuff. But Stephen Willis, Locked On podcast, talk some Ole Miss. That's coming up next. Halftime show. Tyler actually showed up. Good to see you. Bring me a frame.
I ate all of them.
You ate all of them? Selfish. All right, we'll talk some Ole Miss next. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler's here. We'll roll till 3 on the game. What we're talking about, obviously, is Carolina, Ole Miss, Saturday, 3:30 kick here on the game in Columbia, and also our sister station in Myrtle Beach. We get everything cooking with our local pregame show here on 107.5 The Game at 10:30. Tyler and Elijah will be doing this because I will not be present. But Tyler and Elijah will be grabbing me banana pudding out of the press box, which is the most important thing of this entire situation.
I feel like they know your schedule now, so when you don't come to the game, they intentionally put it out.
Yeah, I got to talk to. I got to talk to my buddy Fink. I don't think Steve Fink has anything to do with it, but I'm just going to talk to Fink.
No, I think he specifically is the one that's keeping you away from the banana pudding. He's telling Seawells, hey, Terry's not going to be here this weekend. You can break it out.
Ford's not going to be here. Bust out the banana pudding. All right, let's talk some Ole Miss. Excellent podcast video. You can watch it on YouTube with Steve Willis. It's Locked On Podcast. Steve, thanks for jumping in, my friend. We appreciate you and putting up with our stupid banana pudding talk. Thanks, man.
Hey, man, I like banana pudding as much as anybody. I just want to know, now I want banana pudding.
Hey, if you're at the game, I don't know if you're going to be there or not, they will have banana pudding. So, and it's very good. So grab a bunch of them and put them in your backpack and take them back to Oxford.
Yeah, seriously. That sounds really good. I might after this hit the grocery store to go get some banana pudding.
Hey, Steve, we appreciate you again jumping in, man. And your work, excellent work daily with the podcast on Locked On. One thing I want to ask you after, look, we were all surprised that Ole Miss lost at home to Kentucky. I think Kentucky was surprised they didn't lose to Ole Miss. They just won't admit it. What's the vibe and the feeling in Oxford this week after a surprising loss to a team that nobody thought Ole Miss would lose to?
Urgency. It's all about urgency. This game is as close to a must-win as Ole Miss can have without it actually mathematically being a must-win game. If the goal in the preseason was to make the playoff, you do not lose to Carolina and get 2 losses with Georgia still on the schedule and probably get to the playoff. So urgency is probably the word of the day. Now, the reality is if Ole Miss goes into Columbia and wins the game, if they go to Tiger Stadium and beat LSU, they're right where they were preseason projected to be going after that game. So it can be good. Everything can be fine, but it can also be a disaster come 7 o'clock Saturday night.
Stephen, one thing you've been very adamant about on your shows this week is the ball distribution around the Ole Miss offense. A lot of questions about why, Ulysses Bentley IV isn't getting used more, why Caden Lee and Juice Wells aren't getting as many targets as Trey Harris, who is having a phenomenal season. Is there any sense that maybe the offense could look any different this weekend, getting more of those guys involved against South Carolina?
Historically, that is the case. Jackson Dart has not had back-to-back mid to bad football games in his entire Ole Miss career. And it's a situation to where whenever he struggles in one game, he really goes off in the next game. If you look at the Alabama game a year ago, they held him to 200 and something yards, sacked him a couple of times. Alabama won that game. The next week against LSU, he threw for nearly 400 yards, ran for 50 yards, 4 touchdowns, and was basically unstoppable. And that routine repeats itself all through his career. If you go back to his sophomore year when he was like 4 or 5 games in, the first time that they played a Mark Stoops Kentucky team, Ole Miss ended up winning that game, but Jackson Dart only threw for 150 yards and an interception in that game. The next week against Vanderbilt, he threw for 477 yards and 4 touchdowns. Having a back-to-back bad game is not something historically that we see from Jackson Dart, which tells me that whatever is done in that game, he does a really good job of transitioning over in a way to defeat that whenever teams start copying it. So I do expect Ole Miss's offense to probably put their best performance on the field on Saturday.
Stephen Willis hanging out with us, Locked On Podcast about Ole Miss daily. You can see Stephen, just go to YouTube and check it out. Right here on the game, halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Stephen, the one thing I find interesting is we all fall in love with Jackson Dart throwing the ball downfield, explosive plays in the passing game to Harris and whoever else. And then we talk about the tempo and all these things. But Ole Miss, just to me, they want to run the ball. They gained over 200 yards on the ground the first 4 games. Kentucky shut down the running game. Also, Ole Miss wasn't on the field that much, but I think it was like only 1.5 yards before contact. We talk about all these other fancy things, but at the end of the day, I believe for Ole Miss, the key is they start running the ball against South Carolina, they're not going to stop. Am I right?
Yeah, that's pretty close. It's honestly, I know that, and I will concede the fact that if Lenore Sellers did not get hurt, South Carolina probably beats LSU. Okay, so what I'm saying, couch it with that. But LSU doesn't come back if they don't find a running back that can run the ball against South Carolina. The first quarter, they did not have many yards at all. Their offense was pretty stagnant. Then all of a sudden, they found that third-string running back. I think Caleb Durham is his name. He ended up running for 9 yards a carry, a couple of touchdowns, and that opened some stuff up across the middle of the field. And all of a sudden, by the second half, LSU's offense was kind of doing what they wanted to do. I think that is the game plan for Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss needs to utilize the quick game because you can't draw back and have 3 to 4 seconds with South Carolina's ends coming around. If they know where you're going to be, they're going to get to the quarterback. So you're going to have to use the quick game. You're going to have to use some outside zone. I wouldn't be surprised to see some jet sweeps to get that defensive line moving sideline to sideline. And when you add that with the tempo that's going to be brought in, you could have a situation that midway second quarter, midway third quarter, those 5-yard games become 10, become 15, and the tempo can take them apart.
Speaking of the running game, and I know Lane Kiffin likes to list a lot of guys on his injury report as questionable, but some legitimate concern coming away with the Kentucky game when it comes to Henry Parrish, the main running back for LSU. Anything you can tell us about the status of him at this point during the week?
Man, injuries, with this staff, you just don't know. With them putting out the injury report with everybody being questionable. Now, Henry Parrish did get nicked up against Kentucky. We know that something's there. I would not be surprised if, as this week goes on in the injury report, we hear more and more about the extent of what Henry Parrish is. I do think Ulysses Bentley is going to feature this weekend, and I think Ole Miss is going to run outside this weekend, which this season they've been predominantly an inside run team. And whenever that happens and those players become available, that's going to help. But Matt Jones is also an injury report as questionable. He's the backup running back. So Ulysses Bentley could be the third team, and Rashad Amos is the fourth team, which South Carolina fans should be familiar with.
Stephen Willis with us, Locked On Podcast here on the Halftime Show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head on the game. Stephen, you flip it over. Ole Miss, they've been good with a lot of things on defense. One thing they've been really good at is committing penalties, especially the secondary. They're a little handsy, a little pass interference, defensive holding. How much of that is a concern? Because you got to get that stuff cleaned up, especially if you're giving teams first downs when you're getting stops.
Yeah, that's whenever they're drive-saving penalties where they just – Kentucky doesn't beat Ole Miss if they didn't have 3 drive-saving penalties on a drive before halftime that ended up in a touchdown. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Ole Miss literally kind of did some fluky type stuff, and if they can clean the penalties up against South Carolina, I don't know that South Carolina can score 24, and I do think 24 points is kind of the magic number in this game. If South Carolina can get to 24, they have a chance to make this really interesting. If they cannot get to 24, I think Ole Miss might go past them. But I think penalties are going to be a big part of that because Ole Miss can't make drives easier to sustain, which they did against the Kentucky Wildcats because in the SEC, that'll get you beat, and that did get you beat.
Stephen Willis, Locked On Podcast, Banana Pudding Aficionado. We appreciate you, man. We'll let you go so you can run to the store.
Yes, definitely. I'm on my way to Publix right now.
Hey, seriously, Stephen, thank you for your time. I know it's a little busy for all of us this time of year. Thanks, man.
Hey, anytime, and enjoy this juiced atmosphere.
We'll see you, man. Have a good one.
All right, take
Stephen
care,
Willis, Locked On Podcast.
Oh, it's going to be juiced, all right.
We ran out of time. I wanted to get to that, but we kind of ran out of time. And to be honest, not to be mean, that is a talking point of like intangible. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, Juice Wells really hasn't been much of a factor for Ole Miss.
The fear is that he's going to have his breakout game.
Well, that's the thing, because remember, Carolina fans will tell you, like, ex-players come back to bite them all the time.
Kusnard, Braswell, just in this year alone, we've seen that. So I think people are on pins and needles like, oh, God, is he going to go for $150 and 3 touchdowns?
Exactly. So we didn't just get a chance to get to the Juice Wells thing. And really, for them, Juice Wells hasn't been much of a factor at all.
Yeah, I mean, Trey Harris is getting about almost half the receptions on this offense so far.
Yeah, Trey Harris, 40% of the catches this year?
Now, if you take him away, does that mean Juice steps up? We'll have to see.
Right, because that's the thing, right? Are you going to, Try to take Harris out of it by rolling coverages, doubling, whatever you want to do, shading. Does that now leave Juice Wells in one-on-one opportunities he can take advantage of? But he's not even the second leading receiver. So
A lot of things baked into this.
yes, it is. Firehouse Sub text the hour next, 803-404-6100. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, till 3 here on the game. Time for our Firehouse Sub text of the hour, 803-404-6100. What do you got there, brother?
Nick poses an interesting question here. Says, have you thought maybe Kentucky got caught looking ahead and South Carolina punched them in the face? I'm not saying Carolina's not a good team, but I just don't believe they're 25 points better than Kentucky.
So I think that's what we do. And I appreciate the text. And I get where you're coming from. I do. I understand because, remember, Georgia was the next week, right, for Kentucky?
Yep.
And everyone thought...
And they played great in that week.
They did. Everyone thought that Kentucky at home... Remember, Kentucky was, a touchdown favorite over South Carolina?
Oh, my God. They were engraving the national championship trophy.
Remember, they were piecing their way to the college football
exactly.
playoff.
They were buying tickets to Atlanta and, getting hotels for the Sugar Bowl and all that stuff.
So, could they have been looking past them? I'm not going to say no way. I just think we fall into these... It's human nature, especially in college football. Since there was no playoff for such a long time, we would do this. Well, South Carolina beat Kentucky by 25. Were they 25 points better than Kentucky? They were that day, and that's all that really matters.
Right.
But that's what we do. And then, Kentucky lost by 1 to Georgia. Well, Georgia lost to Alabama, but South Carolina beat Kentucky. So does that make South Carolina better than Georgia?
It's all the transitive property.
Right.
Every year at the end of the college football season, there's something called the Circle of Suck.
Yes.
Where they just say this team beat that team and that team. Then it's like, North Texas is technically the best team in college football if we use this analogy.
It's always fun.
Exactly.
It's just fun to do. But so I always try to be careful in those kind of comparisons. Because, like for an example, South Carolina could play LSU next week and win that game. Then they could play Kentucky again and lose that game.
Sure.
I just think it's such a week-to-week sport now because the transfer portal and the way things have changed. I don't know if you can just sit and say, well, they're this or they're that over one game.
And for the context of the question there, I'm not saying that Kentucky did or didn't overlook South Carolina, but they didn't have any reason to, considering the fact, as we talked about going into that game, these are two programs that have been on pretty equal footing for a while now. They're right in that kind of middle to lower tier of the SEC for the most part. And it's a game that, again, leading into it, we talked about it's a one-score game more often than not. Carolina had gotten the win the past 2 years. Kentucky had no grounds to just think that they were going to just cakewalk past them. You know what I mean? And I get it. You're looking at the Old Dominion game, saying they struggled with Old Dominion. We blew out Southern Miss in a quarter and a half or 2.5 quarters. Like, they shouldn't have been that cocky going into that game.
No, I mean, look, not to be mean, very few teams in college football should be cocky to begin with now. I mean, you can't afford to be that way. But if you are Kentucky, and you know who you are, why would you overlook anyone? I mean, look, Kentucky a couple years ago lost to Vandy. So you don't overlook anyone if you're Kentucky. Now, the fans might have been overlooking South Carolina.
Right.
That could have happened. I mean, you were listening to Kentucky radio laughing your butt off.
Oh, it was entertaining, that's for sure.
But I think Kentucky, the football team, the players shouldn't be overlooking anyone. And that's not trying to be, disrespectful to Kentucky. It's just true. You're not good enough to overlook anyone except the cupcakes that your coach brings you so you can get your 3 easy wins a year. But no, to the texter, I'm not saying you're wrong. We weren't there. It's just hard to believe Kentucky's players would overlook South Carolina.
They did not have enough reason to. And if they did, that's on them for being too cocky after playing 35 minutes in week 1.
Yeah, I get where you're going, but I just don't. I kind of don't think that would be the case. We appreciate the text like always, and we'll do another one next hour, 803-404-6100. All right, we will be kicking football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. There's a couple interesting things looking at this football game. Matchups. We'll dig into them a little bit deeper. Like, Ole Miss struggled against the only real team they played in one interesting area we're going to get into, defensively, Ole Miss. South Carolina has an advantage as well when Ole Miss has the ball on offense. We'll see if they can exploit, or will Ole Miss let them exploit it? Just looking at the Kentucky game, it's hard to take anything seriously from the first 4 games.
Right.
It just is. It was almost like video game when you build your ultimate team and you just you go off and you play a schmo. That's kind of what it was like. So just gleaming off of the Kentucky stats, highlights, grades. We'll give you a couple ideas about South Carolina in this game moving forward. Football, the 1 o'clock hour coming next here on the halftime show on the game. (803-875-MENS). That's the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Dr. Dan and the crew over at the Men's Clinic. It's a thing. It's real. We don't want to admit it. We're guys. Nothing's ever wrong with us. And if there is something wrong, it'll be fine tomorrow. No big deal. Nothing a beer won't cure. But now, if you're not sleeping the way you used to sleep, if you go to the gym and you can't lift the weights you used to lift, or you don't recover from your exercise like you used to, you don't have any life drive, personal drive, sex drive, professional drive, whatever drive isn't there anymore. That's a thing. You don't remember stuff like you used to. That's a thing. And it might just be low testosterone. One way to find out. You just give the folks at the Men's Clinic a call again, 803-875-MENS. Set a free confidential consultation. Tell them your story. If they think it could be low T, they'll do some lab work. If it is low testosterone, they will put you on a program specifically designed for you to get you back to being you again. It's a Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. 1 o'clock hour is always football, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. You weren't here. You were eating frames at goal line. Dave told us the X factor of South Carolina winning on Saturday.
What's that?
Dave said he, in every USC Ole Miss game he's ever been to, Gamecocks won.
So he's got to be there. Was he there in 09?
He's been there for, no, I don't think he was there in 09 because he might have been here. But he has been at every Gamecock Ole Miss game. I think he's been to 3 or 4. And South Carolina's won every game. So that was Dave's way of saying, I can't work Saturday because I have to be at the game so South Carolina can win.
Coach Beamer, send some tickets this way.
And send us somebody to run the board and produce for us.
No, Beamer can do that. Dave can coach.
Because Dave is more vital.
Exactly. If Dave's there, they're going to win regardless.
Right.
Like, Coach, you got it. Take the day off.
Shane.
I can show him how to run the board. It'll be great.
You know, I think he'd be really good at producing and executive producing. Running sound.
What SEC coach do you think would be good at radio?
Like on the air or
like
just
any aspect of it?
Kirby's so detail-oriented and so focused, he could probably go over there and produce.
Yeah, that's not bad.
He could do it.
I don't think he has the personality for talking as much.
You know what's funny? And I was listening to the guy that was talking to you folks from Ole Miss. And we kind of talked about this, and he pushed it home too. There's this perception that Lane Kiffin is Joe Funnyman and Joe Jokester and Joe Charisma, and he's running around having fun with everybody, and wearing togas around the campus.
Gotta keep your eyes peeled. Old Lane's gonna pull something out of the hat today.
Goofball Lane's here, and he was like, he's not really that guy, like you think he would be. So my first thought of who would be really good on the air as a host. You're thinking of someone with personality, charisma, but Lane really, we get this idea that Lane is that guy, and maybe he's not as much of that guy as we think. Or he turns it on for the national media, and then once the local people come around, he's like,
That's what Neil said. He's a little more open when it comes to talking to ESPN or CBS or something like that. When it's, because I went back and listened to his entire presser on Monday previewing the South Carolina game, and he's just very bleak and to the point, and you can tell some questions annoy him and that kind of stuff. He's not, we hear the zingers, right? Like, he said something about this coach in his press conference, or took a shot at this guy. That's just that small little 20-second clip of 15 total minutes, and it doesn't even happen every single week. Again, the guy on Twitter seems to be completely different than the guy you get in your traditional press conference settings or whatever.
Yeah, I think the guy to put on this side here hosting, I think would be the most fun would be Uncle Sam.
Oh, him. I think Drinkwitz would actually be kind of interesting because he would always have something to say. I
think, too, the thing with him, he would be the most compelling because he would also know how to basically poke the audience.
Yeah, push the buttons a little bit.
Push the buttons. I think Uncle Sam would be a great storyteller. He'd be fun to listen to. I'm running through my head real quick in the SEC.
Billy Napier might be good at talk radio just because he's just even keel monotone the entire time.
If you need to take a nap?
Yeah. He could tell you about, the latest things with the economics and stuff like that.
Or tell you what, the one, because he seems to be a bit emotional and kind of a loose cannon in his life, Hugh Freeze.
I feel like Hugh Freeze might dig out the tinfoil hat on some things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no doubt. By the way, did you see this? All this talk about Hugh Freeze and will he survive and what's going on in the plains. He just stole a 4-star dual-threat quarterback from Notre Dame.
Yeah, big flip. And,
again, Freeze was a good recruiter at Ole Miss. Look at the talent Freeze brought to Ole Miss. All you got to do is pay some electric bills.
Yeah. Freeze was doing NIL before NIL was a thing.
Ahead of the curve. He was just a trailblazer.
We all know the nefarious means he went to land some guys that ended up getting him ousted in Oxford, but he's a changed man.
2 words: burner phone.
You would think a coach with his level of income, that wouldn't be hard, but apparently not.
You go back to before that stuff. Mike Price, why are you using your credit card?
Yeah, as the new head coach of one of the most recognizable brands in all of college football, you're not going to fly under the radar there, bud.
That's where you got to go to the ATM and snag some cash.
The tide is rolling, baby.
Sure was. Hey, undefeated.
Never lost.
Never lost a game.
That's something I like to think about a lot. Like, if he even just coached one season, what would college football look like?
I know.
Because, and again, if you believe in the butterfly effect, Nick Saban then never ends up at Alabama.
Yeah.
Where does he go? Does he come back to college football? Like, what does the structure of football as a whole in America look like if Mike Price does not do what he did at that golf outing?
If Mike Price uses cash?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Anyway, so when you look at this football game, as we talk football, among other things in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. All right, so the feeling is that Ole Miss on offense wants to run the football. And if they can run the football, that's a bad sign for South Carolina. Because Lane will just keep having Jackson Dart turn around and hand it. Or Ole Miss is going to try a lot of quick stuff in the passing game, like Akron, like LSU started doing in the second half. Because LSU in the first quarter was trying to drop Garrett Nussmeier back in the pocket, and Nussmeier almost got decapitated by the South Carolina pass rush. So the feeling is run the ball, get the ball out of your quarterback's hands, Jackson Dart quick. Don't let the South Carolina pass rush start to dictate and take over the game. And here's the other reason why Ole Miss should do that. One very interesting matchup. If you just look at the Pro Football Focus grades from Ole Miss's offensive line and pass blocking, it did not go well. First of all, you look at the edges. Kyle Kennard will go up against Diego Pounds. Diego Pounds had a 55 run blocking grade versus Kentucky. That's below average. Now, Dylan Stewart will go up against the best Ole Miss offensive lineman in Micah Pettis, who had a 70 pass blocking grade against Kentucky. The rest of the offensive line, including the two transfers from UW, Reese McIntyre, who took over at center, 60.5. The two Washington transfers, Nate Calipo and Julius Bulow, both under 60 in pass blocking grade against Kentucky. So basically, the pass rush of South Carolina versus the offensive line of Ole Miss, just if you stop and look at the grades against Kentucky, that would be advantage South Carolina. So the guess again, Ole Miss is going to drop Jackson Dart back a lot, 5 and 7 steps, and try to have him make some throws. It's going to be a lot of quicker stuff. And, of course, willing to run the football because LSU had some success, and for one drive, Kentucky had success running the rock at South Carolina. Flip side, in coverage, the Ole Miss corners and linebackers really struggled against Kentucky. Whether you look at the grades, you had 3 defensive back interference, well, 2 pass interference and 1 illegal use of the hands calls in the first half against Kentucky. We heard Stephen Willis bring it up when he was on with us. That helped Kentucky on a touchdown drive.
Oh, yeah. You're giving them free first downs at that point in time, which has been a consistent problem with this team's secondary mainly for the entire year.
So if South Carolina can find time for Lenore Sellers to throw the football, basically, if you just go by the Kentucky grades, there are plays to be made in the passing game if you can give your quarterback time to actually throw it.
Right.
Either the plays will be made by you and your receivers making plays or by the Ole Miss defensive backs committing pass interference or grabbing. So, again, if you have time to throw it, there's stuff that you can accomplish in the passing game against the Ole Miss corners and the Ole Miss linebackers. So there's a couple things to take a look at for Saturday. And Ole Miss, by the way, 6th fastest team in the country.
Yep.
In tempo. By the way, you know who the fastest team in the country is?
Old Dominion. Mm-hmm. That's right.
How about that?
Which, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Tempo's not this, foreign thing that you don't see a whole lot anymore. Most teams are used to it to some degree. The problem is the lack of substituting, which in South Carolina, we talked about the entire offseason, very excited about the depth that they have through basically all levels of the defense, being able to keep fresh bodies in there. Well, if Ole Miss is reeling off positive plays and staying ahead of the chains, they may go on a 10-play drive, and you may have the exact same guys in there the entire time. And, by that 6th or 7th play, they're, holding their hands on their head and trying to catch wind. And guess what? They're going to snap the ball again in 5 seconds.
Yeah, if Ole Miss doesn't sub you can't sub, and then you got the same crew on the field. Now, the good news for South Carolina on that is, if you have Kennard and Stewart on the field, along with Tonka and Boogie or Sanders or whatever combination, you've got guys who you're confident in to make plays, just like if you have Knight and Bam Martin Scott and Debo in some combination and Bengali Kamara. You feel good, but here's the thing. To your point, they haven't been playing a lot of snaps this year. They've been really good at rotating these defenders in the front two levels of defense.
Yep.
What happens if these guys start getting called on the field a lot? Are you going to start rotating? Okay, you just went through a 10-play drive and you couldn't sub. Okay, next series, are you now sitting down guys because they were tired through that series? Now, are you going to, instead of hockey line sub, are you going to sub by series because you couldn't sub during that last series?
That's what Clayton White gets paid the money for.
That's the chess match.
He's got to figure that part out.
That is, because if you can't, let's say you're like sitting in your 4-2-5, whatever. Next series, are you going to now put in Gilbert Edmond? And let's say Tonka wasn't in so Tonka's back in. Is Nick Barrett going to get in there because you got to rest Huntley and you got to rest Sanders? Are you going to keep Kennard out there anyway? Because, dude, somebody's got to stay out there. And then if it's Debo and Knight, does it become Debo and Kamara? Or Bam Martin Scott and Debo, or Scott and Kamara, whatever. Are you going to just say, next series, we got to sub it out because we got to get you guys to be able to breathe, especially if South Carolina goes 3 and out? Then here it comes again.
I think it can be based on feel as well. And again, Debo's used to playing 99% of the snaps in this game. It's not exactly foreign to him. You don't want to put him out there for every single snap if you don't have to. You like to have some rotation. But if you say, all right, we went 3 and out or had 5 plays in a punt, we got to get back out there. All right, Debo, you go back out there, assess how everybody else is feeling and, who does need a break, who needs to catch their breath and all that kind of stuff, and kind of go from there. Again, that's the chess match of football. That, when you're just looking at it from the running plays and throwing the ball and tackling, this is the nuance that people like us get so excited about, because you have to outsmart the other team. You have to move your chess pieces accordingly to give yourself the best chance to win.
Yeah, we dork out on that stuff. That's fun. That's the back and forth and the brain fight between coordinators, which is always a good time. Couple more things to kind of throw out to you about this game coming up in the next segment regarding the Ole Miss defense. Time of possession. Is it really as important as we think? And then, to me, one of the most front and center things to look for when Ole Miss has the ball that South Carolina has to be able to control. We got that coming up here as we go football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. And also, obviously, we'll get back to some sound from Dow Loggins and Clayton White. Tonight, this is Thursday, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Carolina Calls with Shane Beamer and Todd Ellis from Backstreets. That kicks in at 6. And then at 7:30, our coverage of Thursday Night Football. It's the Bucs and the Falcons. So far, it's kind of weird. Falcons look like a real contender in the NFC South. We'll see.
Did you see they're bringing back the old Fulton County Stadium field for tonight?
No, I did not see that.
I'll show you a picture of it. And wearing the throwback uniforms. Oh, yeah.
How about your Falcons won a game last week without scoring an offensive touchdown?
You know
That's
what?
not Falcons-like, Tyler.
Young Wei Koo is never going to have to buy another drink in Atlanta ever again.
Well, tell you what, that dude's nails.
He's money, man.
And do you remember how bad you guys had it kicking-wise for a while?
Oh, yeah. It was pretty rough. When the Matt Bryants and Jason Elams eventually fell off, it was a little bit of a struggle to find that next guy. And Young Wei Koo, he came along.
That kick, that might have been good from 78.
That's right.
That was a hell of a kick. All right, halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We're rolling up until 3 here on the game. All right, before we get to some important points of South Carolina and Ole Miss, grill of the game, obviously we did not have a South Carolina game last Saturday. I almost feel like grill of the game isn't so much of a hit. Grill of the game is Georgia takes the lead late. Alabama gets the ball. How many plays did it take Alabama to get the lead back?
1.
Grill of the game is what Ryan Williams did to the Georgia secondary. Not only do you make the catch you make, but then you're okey-doking folks all over the place.
When you can manage to make 2 high-level defenders just run into each other like it's a Stooges skit, that's impressive.
So that's the grill of the game. The Jalen Milroe to Ryan Williams touchdown that put Alabama ahead for good in what has been the best game of the season so far. That actually exceeded the expectation and the hype. So that's our grill of the game. All right, football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. All right, time of possession for Kentucky against Ole Miss. Kentucky had the rock 39 minutes and 43 seconds. Ole Miss doesn't care. That's not the point of time of possession, because Ole Miss, the 6th fastest offense in the country. They play fast. When you play fast, time of possession does not matter to you, because your advantage in your mind is putting the defense in distress by playing fast.
Right.
But what time of possession does, like for Kentucky, was keep that offense off the field to score. But 2, Kentucky was not having empty possessions. Kentucky wasn't, 12 plays, 52 yards, 5 minutes, and then you're not scoring. And really, you want to score touchdowns, but you got to get points. And so Kentucky occupied the football, and they were productive enough offensively in the point category to make the time of possession a positive because you didn't waste it. Does that make sense?
Right.
So time of possession is overrated in theory. Oh, no, it's overrated in general all the time. Overrated in theory when you play in Ole Miss. But if you can possess the football, South Carolina, and score touchdowns as you're possessing the football, now you're shrinking and shortening the game. And that's a good thing against this kind of an offense. So it is a stat, but it isn't a stat, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other one is the number 5, the number of defensive penalties Ole Miss had in the first half last week against Kentucky. You had a substitution infraction, you had a defensive offsides, 2 pass interference penalties, and a defensive holding in the backfield. Ole Miss is handsy and they're sloppy on defense. Take advantage of it. Hopefully they'll be handsy and sloppy on defense again this Saturday.
Yeah, definitely so. And again, this is an extremely talented defense across the board. That kind of goes without saying. We've talked about that pretty much the entire week so far. But if they're making simple mistakes, which some they've done all season long, and again, when you have a defense that now has a reputation of being very handsy, being very physical, mugging receivers and stuff like that, you're going to lose the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the officiating, because if it's close, they're probably going to call it on you.
Another number is 9 of 12. No, I should have ready 45%. That was Ole Miss's success rate on first down Saturday against Kentucky. Basically, Ole Miss gained 5 yards or more on 9 of 20 opportunities on 1st and 10. First down's huge in this game. I think it's a huge down to begin with, but it's even bigger in this game because if you're South Carolina, first of all, on defense, you want Ole Miss on 2nd and 9.
Right.
Or 2nd and 8. Or 2nd and 12. You don't want Ole Miss sitting at 2nd and 2 and 3 with their entire playbook open. You've got to look. You're going to lose some on first down. Just Ole Miss is going to gain yards. They are. You just have to be able to at some point get off the field. And 3rd down stops start on 1st down. You got to stop them on 1st down. You got to give them 2nd and long situations. You cannot have them setting up at 2nd and short. And the flip side, South Carolina struggled in success rate this year on 1st down offensively. With this Ole Miss defense, and look, are they, handsy? Sure. But they're also really talented. Now, they might not have our boy Princely on Saturday. We'll see.
Yep.
But Ole Miss is very talented on defense. You don't want to be sitting around doing a lot of 2nd and 10s against that defense. So it's real important to get second and manageable, like the 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4s, heck, even 2nd and 6. You want to be able to be second and manageable against Ole Miss. So that 45% number is huge. Those are, again, some things just to take a look at as South Carolina and Ole Miss line it up on Saturday. We start our coverage again 10:30 here with Gamecocks Game Day, sponsored by Lex Med Ortho from the party lot at Sound and Images, right across from Williams Bryce on Bluff. All right, back to some sound here real quick, Tyler. Let's go to Dow Loggins. And I love Dow because Dow is very entertaining and very personable while telling you really much of nothing. Here's Dow, cut one, Tyler. South Carolina, again this year, is one of the worst teams in America in giving up sacks. Now, is it only the offensive line? No. The tight ends have struggled in pass protection. The running backs at times have struggled in pass protection. There are times the wide receivers aren't getting separation or you're not getting open. Sometimes your quarterback's holding the ball too long. There's a lot that goes into giving up sacks. Here's Dow Loggins talking about how do you correct the issue of giving up sacks.
Yeah, most of them are coming up on third down. I think we have 16. I think 10 of the 16 are on third down. And you go back and you watch them all and you figure out why. And you start with a scheme, and then you start going to each individual position, whether it be offensive line, tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks, are they holding it too long, or wide receivers not getting open, or we put them in the right situation as a coaching staff. So you evaluate all that and you work to correct it. Today was our third down day, so we got a good work at it today.
It's never one thing. I mean, we sit and say, okay, the tackle position has got to get better in pass protection. The tight ends have to get better in pass protection. Running backs haven't been consistent in it either. And, there's times, quarterbacks got to get rid of the ball. And, there are times when you watch, you can't, obviously not the all 22, but when you're sitting in the press box, I mean, you'll see receivers sometimes not getting open. Mm-hmm. Or they're set up where they're not getting schemed open. You're asking them to go beat their guy, and they're not beating their guy. So there's a lot to this. But offensive line-wise, Casey Henry and Josiah Thompson have to get better in pass protection. Kamar Bell has to get more consistent in pass protection. Those are issues. Lenora Sellers, you go through your progressions. Sometimes the quarterback's having a difficult time maybe reading the field, going through progressions. It's a learning experience. Remember, Lenora Sellers, he's started, 3 games in his career. Mm-hmm. He's learning. And in game 1, he just went to option 1 and he hauled, man. There was no going through progressions. There was, okay, first guy's not open, time for me to take off. And Lenora Sellers has gotten a lot better since game 1 in going through progressions, or when he does break the pocket, he's looking downfield now to make a throw. He's not just looking to take off to run. You get hit enough, you start thinking about that kind of stuff. You realize you're not running around in high school anymore, and these guys are as big as you, and they're as fast, and they hit you. And you're probably sitting around going, if I put my eyes up and look downfield, I can make a big play in the passing game. You know what I avoid?
Getting hit
by 3 or 4 guys.
Well, and I think it's also encouraging to see that last week a guy in Brock Vandegrift, who's in the exact same situation as Sellers, only being a handful of starts into his college career, went out there and had a fairly successful day against that Ole Miss defense.
And that's a great point. He did. He had his best day.
Yeah.
Against Ole Miss.
Short sample size, but right. Considering what he looked like against South Carolina, he may as well have been the league MVP.
And that's the thing you think about. Again, the old transitive property of everything. But you watch, Ole Miss has a heck of a pass rush, just like South Carolina. But Kentucky found a way to make plays in the passing game against Ole Miss. Part of it is their corners and linebackers struggled in coverage. So when Ole Miss wasn't getting heat on Vandegrift, there were plays to be made. Now, again, Kentucky, to be fair, Kentucky's wide receiver group right now is better than South Carolina's. Kentucky's got 3 guys who are going to get the opportunity to play in the NFL. South Carolina, their group's not quite to that level yet. But the hope is if Kentucky can go out there and find a way to get some stuff done in the passing game against this team, Ole Miss, hopefully South Carolina's got some stuff there too. If Sellers has time to throw it, there's stuff that can go your way down the field.
Right.
So, all right, we'll get to some Clayton White in the next segment. As Clayton was
feeling good yesterday.
He was feeling good yesterday, wasn't it? One thing you gotta stop is Jackson Dart. We'll hear Clayton White's explanation on how you stop Jackson Dart coming up. Friday, from Columbia Craft. 3 to 6, our tailgate show at Columbia Craft, Green Street in the Vista. Post-game show, Jay and Elijah will be there getting you ready for Carolina and Ole Miss. That's 3 to 6. Go grab a craft beer. Enjoy yourself at our little tailgate show. Again, 3 to 6 at Columbia Craft, Green Street in the Vista. That's tomorrow here on the Game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Football in the 1 o'clock hour on the Game. All right, where are we at? The clock in here. This is the thing.
We are halfway through the show, Terry.
Well, here's the thing. The clock in here that I always look at, because remember Friday we had all heck break loose.
Right.
We had a station went off the air multiple times in the morning. We had electrical outage here in the building. So right now I'm looking at our big clock on the wall, and it's 8:45.
Well, it's right twice a day.
Oh, it's moving. It's
it's moving. It's not stuck. Okay.
No. So it's 8:45 right now. So I go up and look at it real quick, and the clock doesn't match what we just did, which is what we're talking about, which is the bottom of every hour.
All you have to do when you look at that clock is add on
4 hours and 45 minutes.
4 hours and 45 minutes. You'll get the exact time. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I'll just do that off the top of my head all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll work. All right, what we're talking about, obviously, Carolina football taking on Ole Miss Saturday. Coordinators talked yesterday. Dow Loggins, Clayton White. Here's Clayton White discussing, look, Jackson Dart, up until the Kentucky game, led the nation in passing yards. Ole Miss, explosive plays down the field after explosive plays down the field. All that stopped against Kentucky. Dart was 1 for 7 and throws 20-plus yards. The one good thing for Ole Miss was, their big play wide receiver Harris had like 121 yak yards. He was the only guy that really balled out for the entire Kentucky offense, to be fair. But Jackson Dart, you have to stop. You have to account for. Dart can also run around with his legs. But here's Clayton White talking about number 14, Tyler, Jackson Dart's skill set.
He does have a nice skill set. I think they do a really good job of him using his mobility. Obviously, he's very mobile in the pocket, but I do think they have a very selective quarterback run game for him that makes him very difficult to defend. I think that his skill set is, you could similar say it's more of, if you want a big picture, almost like a Josh Allen type of quarterback, a quarterback who can throw and run, can beat you with his feet, can throw for a lot of yards and touchdowns, and he definitely can beat you with his feet just like Josh Allen.
Probably wouldn't go Josh Allen, but I get it.
That's high praise. Somebody that can push the ball down the field and also hurt you with his feet as well, which you do have to account for.
I will say this about Jackson Dart, and the numbers will back this up. Jackson Dart in his career against okay teams and bad teams, Jackson Dart's a killer. Against good teams, not so much. You look at those two losses last year, the Bama game and the Georgia game.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Jackson Dart was not very good. You go back in his career at Ole Miss against really good teams or against really good defenses, Jackson Dart has struggled, just to be fair. So we'll see what Jackson Dart does this Saturday against a good South Carolina defense because, again, Jackson Dart had issues last week against Kentucky. First of all, he also was pressured on 39% of his throws, to be fair.
And that's the thing for me is if you can keep pressure on Jackson Dart, you see a much different quarterback as you see usually kind of across the board, and the offensive line had done a good job against the lesser opponents, not really letting that become an issue. But last week against Kentucky, he got sacked 4 times. You obviously see him have his quote-unquote worst game of the season, which I will use worst in quotation marks because it wasn't an awful game. Still threw over 200 yards, but
it just wasn't what he did the first 4 weeks.
It wasn't what he did the first 4 weeks, and more specifically, he was only 1 of 7 on deep throws more than 20 yards, which again, that's kind of the bread and butter of this offense is to kill you with explosive plays, which they weren't able to do at a super high clip against Kentucky.
Now, Tree Harris, again, 121 yak yards. He went nuts. What did he go for, 168 or something?
He's averaging over $150 a game.
Yeah. So Harris had a big game against Kentucky in the loss. He's the guy you got to account for. He has 40% of their receptions this year. And here is Clayton White talking about Mr. Harris. Let's get cut 20 here real quick, Tyler.
It's kind of you have to do both a little bit. And obviously, we look at targets, we look at all those things to try to figure out, some quarterbacks' favorites, and obviously they have a nice group of receivers that can make plays. So you really can't, tilt your hand one way or the other. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you don't want to get caught in that situation.
But I think it is legitimate to say this, that yes, they've been going to Harris a ton, which is a little surprising. That you have so much talent and you're just really locked onto one guy. So if you do take away Harris, then Caden Lee and Juice Wells, and we can't forget about the tight end who is
Prescorn.
Yes, who is not bad. So there
Somebody
are
else
other,
they also feel like they need to feature more.
yes. So there's other receivers here who have talent. So if you go to take away Harris with your coverage schemes, are you now leaving yourself exposed to some of these other guys to beat you? Or will Dart have an issue getting to the other guys? Will the other guys, will they step up? So that's always the dangerous game you play here with this, right? Is, okay, you take away Harris and dare the other guys to beat you. Now, the other guys are at Ole Miss because they're talented dudes. So if you take away Harris and you start, rolling coverages or whatever for Harris, can these other talented guys actually step up and beat you, and can Dart get him the ball?
And that's where I think people's fears of Juice Wells being the breakout guy in this game, because the game plan is obviously going to revolve around limiting what Trey Harris can do, because, again, he's been 40% of the pass offense so far this season. So if they do take him away, and maybe it is a Caden Lee, but a Juice Wells could certainly step up as well, where you're saying, okay, well, this guy that, not that you weren't planning for them, but didn't see them being as big of a threat, goes out there and pulls 120 yards on you and 2 touchdowns.
Right. Or do you take a look at it like, Harris can get his and you can still win?
Sure. I saw that last week, $176. And so even allowing him to have success, obviously keeping him out in the end zone is going to be a big key, can still lead you to a win. And
what do you do? Is it O'Donnell Fortune is on Harris? How do you handle the whole thing with Harris? And if Harris is dealing with your other DBs, I mean, Kilgore's been much better this year as the nickel slot guy in coverage. The other side, though, let's be honest here, as we're looking at more than just Harris, Collier's been inconsistent. Floyd's been beat up a bit. Swain has shown you some flashes of great ability and upside, but he's also lacked some consistency because he's so raw. So if you're Ole Miss, do you look at whichever wide receivers lining up against those corners? That might be the other thing here to talk about.
Something also worth mentioning is they do move Trey Harris around a little bit. Now, he's primarily a route wide guy because of his size, 6'3", but they will put him in the slot. In fact, they did it more in the last game than they'd done the entire season up to that point. So he's somebody that you're going to be able to move around and potentially line up against different guys on the South Carolina defense.
And so, I mean, look, let's be fair, too. We talk about Kentucky. When South Carolina played Kentucky, we talked about the whole idea of the Kentucky secondary having some problems. That was the weak link of that defense. So with Trey Harris, how much of that was being able to attack a secondary that, you can attack. Now, South Carolina, I feel like they're better this year, and part of it is the pass rush. But I think they are better in coverage. But we're going to find out how much better this week. Because the LSU receiving core now this year is not as good as this receiving group at Ole Miss, especially with Trey Harris. So we'll see. But it's going to be very interesting, these matchups on Saturday. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Friday night, high school football scoreboard show, Love Chevy high school football scoreboard show with Elijah and Justin. Everything gets rolling again at 7 o'clock. Everything in high school football in the region. Justin and Elijah will go over it, break it down. Calls from coaches, from media folks, just fans who walked out of a game and want to talk about it. It's a thing. 7 to 11, Love Chevy High School Football Scoreboard Show right here on The Game with Justin Hall and Elijah Campbell. Firehouse Sub Text the Hour next at 803-404-6100. Football in the 1 o'clock hour here on the Halftime Show, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors right here on The Game. Time for our Firehouse Sub text of the hour at 803-404-6100 as we roll football in the 1 o'clock hour. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. What you got there on the old text line, my man?
Reference to what we were talking about with Jackson Dart's game against Kentucky. Nameless Texter says, what a wacky game that was. I don't know how many times we get that UK Ole Miss result. If they played 10 times, 243 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, can Sellers do that? Excuse me, I think we're talking about what Vandegrift did in that game with that stat line.
Yep. So we'd love to see it. We don't know. We hope. I mean, I think Lenore Sellers has gotten better as the season's progressed. He's still got, obviously, you still want him to get better than he is now, but I think there's been improvement. Again, that first game was not very, except for the pass rush. The Old Dominion game was for a lot of people.
I think this is the game where you really need somebody in the wide receiver core to step up. Now, does that mean they have to go out there and catch 8 balls for 120 yards? Not necessarily, but you need somebody that shows themselves to be a difference maker. They can go out there and make plays. Again, we talked about Ryan Williams all week. Dude's a difference maker on the outside. Like, he is a bona fide superstar receiver, and when he gets the ball in his hands, special things happen. We've seen flashes here and there of guys showing that potential, but nobody has set themselves apart from the pack. This is the kind of game that you need somebody to do that kind of thing on Saturday.
You mean like those, like the plays Gage Larvadan made against Akron?
Yeah, and again, that's Akron. That's, we'll take that with a grain of salt. You need to see that against a team like this, a high-caliber defense that can really kind of set you up for the rest of the year, saying, okay, there's your main guy, and now you're building around that.
Those are the kind of plays you need made.
Yes.
Against, an SEC opponent. So that's the whole. I don't disagree with you. I think, the wide receivers against Kentucky, I thought Dow did a great job scheming guys open. Really did. Against LSU, there were some plays made in the passing game as well, but most of that was, Sellers and Rocket went crazy with big plays in the run game. It would be nice to see a wide receiver go out there and just kind of take over and just start making some plays, just beating his guy off the line of scrimmage, getting himself open, and making explosives himself. That would be good. They have not really done that, but a couple of times this year. So, and they will be healthy. They're as healthy as they've been all season. Because Larvadan, according to the depth chart, he'll be a number 1 along with Bennett and Brown. The number 2 line is also full with Campbell and Harbor and Jacobs. So your top 6 receivers coming into the season, you finally got them all together on the depth chart. Feels like healthy and ready to go.
Right.
So it would be nice to see the Tyler Head want happen and see some receivers making some plays.
I think the entire fan base would be pleased with that. Because, again, you have what you feel like are good pieces there. Jared Brown, Trey Jacobs, again, Larvadan finally, coming along in the Akron game now that he's healthy. Just which of those guys is going to be the guy? Because if you don't have the guy for the back half of your season, I don't know how high the optimism is for the pass game continuing to improve. This is, now that you've had a bye week, you're going into the second third of your schedule, this is the time for somebody to set themselves apart.
You're going to need all hands on deck on your offense because Ole Miss will move the ball. They got their yards against Kentucky. Well, didn't they? Yards per play, they were 2 yards better in yards per play than the Wildcats. We lose track of the fact that Ole Miss did move the football. They just didn't move it the way they did against the 4 cupcakes.
Right.
But they did move the ball. So they're going to get their plays. They're going to get, again, Trey Harris alone had 121 yards a yak last Saturday. So Ole Miss they're going to have explosive plays. They're going to have big plays. You just got to keep them out of the end zone, force them to kick field goals. That would be your best bet. And we'll talk more about this game. Here's some more Dow Loggins and Clayton White as we do what's trending at 2, top of the hour, 2 o'clock. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. I tell you what, NCAA, you don't screw with them. Don't mess with those dudes. You mess with the bull, you get the horns.
So to speak.
Ask Antonio Pierce. You see this?
I did not.
Antonio Pierce, assisted at Arizona State under Herm Edwards. Antonio Pierce slapped with an 8-year show cause. Bam! Break rules, baby. Break rules, Antonio Pierce. 8-year show cause. Think about that. How's that going to mess with your career? How are you going to coach in college, Antonio Pierce?
Does Antonio Pierce have any aspirations of going back to college?
What's your point?
Last I checked, he was an NFL head coach.
Doesn't matter. NCAA showed Antonio Pierce what was up.
Typically, even if you get fired from the Raiders, you can probably still find a good coordinator or assistant job with an NFL team.
Antonio Pierce, Jim Harbaugh, NCAA showed you.
Hey, Jim, don't even think about coming back down here. Well, I wasn't. I have a national championship now. I'm going to go chase Lombardi. Well, even if you wanted to, you couldn't. So there.
How about this? How about a 20-year show cause? What do you think of that, Jim?
You know, they turned around to all the other executives and said, we showed him.
You know what that is? NCAA's the guy who is yelling at the other dude while his one friend's holding him back.
He has the designated get back guy.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go act tough, but you got to pull. I don't want to fight. Don't let me fight.
The moral of the story is if you have no desire to come back to the NCAA, they lay the hammer on you, baby.
Showed him.
Showed Antonio Pierce what was up. What's trending at 2 next here on the game? Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Thanks for hanging out with us, whether you're in Columbia, 107.5 The Game, Florence, 100.5 The Game, Myrtle Beach, 100.3 The Game. You are on our streaming video channel on YouTube at The Game TV Radio, powered by Integrated Media, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. Or if you just snag the app, Google Play, was it Apple Store, Apple Play Store, or whatever the heck it is.
It's so funny when non-Apple users talk about things on like iPhones and just don't know what anything's called.
I was told that iTunes is not the place you would go to get our app.
No, you go to the App Store.
The Apple App Store.
iTunes, which, I mean, I don't even use Apple Music, but iTunes is where you went to like
Just
buy
Apple,
songs.
right? Just songs and music.
Like, you know, where people would buy you the little gift card and you could go buy Katy Perry song for $1.29. Or, you know, go buy Britney Spears songs for 99 cents.
Are they 99 cents now, Britney Spears song?
Oh, you don't buy the music anymore. You just pay like the subscription monthly.
Yeah, what's a subscription monthly for Apple? For iTunes?
I don't do Apple Music. You do Spotify.
That's
but
free.
I have a joint one with my mom. It's like $15 a month. And here's the funny thing about it. Quick story. So something about when I first did it, I didn't split the accounts. So, and for whatever reason, when she would play music on her phone, it would come through mine. So it didn't matter if I was listening to my own playlist. If she started playing something, I started hearing her music.
Oh, that's
my mom works at a school daycare thing, and she works with like 2- and 3-year-olds. And she has they have a cleanup time at the end of the day, right? And they have something called the cleanup song, which she plays on her phone on like their little speaker or whatever. So there were countless times I'd be driving, listening to my own music, and all of a sudden, cleanup time comes on. I have to sit and listen to that for 10 minutes on a loop.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's funny.
And I don't know why her phone was overpowering mine.
I could just picture you driving down the road.
I'm listening to like
You're on a
Metallica
date,
or whatever.
Or you're listening with your buds. Or you're in the car with your buds. You got some Metallica, some Rage going, maybe some a little Wu-Tang or whatever. Then all of a sudden, it's the cleanup song.
And coincidentally, I always felt like I had to be careful when I was listening to music when I knew she was at work because I'm like, this has a lot of vulgarity in it. I don't want the 2-year-olds to hear this. Right. Now, she never said it was a problem, so it was only her phone overpowering mine for some reason.
I'll fire some Straight Outta Compton up at like 1 in the afternoon. Kids will be all right.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't get some angry phone calls from parents.
All right, so we appreciate you if you're dropping our app from the Apple iStore or Google Play.
App Store.
Whatever
Say
the hell
App
it is.
Store.
I'm not part of your cult.
That's what they all say. Then you
I'm
get
not
one and you're a
part of
part
your
of
cult.
it. Listen, hey, I was anti-iPhone for a while. And then I dropped my Android and cracked it and got an iPhone and been on it ever since.
Well, they got a Dare on the Apple Watch. He's like totally mesmerized by the Apple Watch.
I mean, you can do your taxes on that thing.
Oh,
you can vote on that thing.
Dave hits a button and he got an oil change for his car just automatically.
Oh, if he hits another button, his car will pull up in front of the building and park for him.
It's funny. I mean, he's just walking, looking at his watch. I mean, he's not even paying attention to what's going on around
You don't
him.
need anything else if you have that.
Lost his mind. All right, what's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. South Carolina coordinators talking yesterday. We'll focus back on some Dow logins real quick, Tyler. Dow cut 7. The Ole Miss defense has some dudes. I mean, our boy Princely might be hurt on Saturday, but they got guys. This is the best collection of talent Ole Miss has had on defense easily in the Lane Kiffin era. And even in the Kentucky game, they did a lot of stuff well on defense.
No, I mean, they got to Vandegrift quite a few times. Like, they were affecting him, good pass rush, and Kentucky, all that.
They averaged under 3 yards a carry, running the football. So this is a really good defense. And here's Dow Loggins talking about the Rebels D.
Yeah, they're an aggressive group. The front seven's really good. It's as talented as any group that we're going to face. And I think after the Kentucky game, I told you guys that defense at Kentucky was really good and really well coached, and got a ton of respect for Brad White. Some AD needs to hire him and get him out of the conference. But this is another huge challenge. The front, obviously, we're not doing some things offensively. Protection, those things that we're going to have to work on. We're going to face an extremely talented front that's done a good job in recruiting, done a very good job in the transfer portal. These guys play hard. And the thing for those guys is they play complementary football in a different way than we play it. They play with a lot of leads. They've got a really explosive offense. So when you're playing with a lead, you get to rush the passer. It's almost like I go back to my days in Tennessee when we played the Colts, and they got Freeney and Mathis, and they got those two wideouts and Peyton Manning, and all of a sudden it's 14-0, and those guys get to pin their ears back and rush. And I thought Kentucky did a great job trying to play complementary football that way. But these guys play complementary football a different way, and they've married their three phases together very well.
What I take from that, he said, that front seven's good, that defensive front's good. You know what he didn't say at all? That secondary's good.
Got to read between the lines.
So, again, like we talked about earlier, Ole Miss has had trouble in coverage with their corners and their linebackers. And if Lennar Sellers, when South Carolina's throwing the football, if you can give Sellers enough time, there are plays to be made against that secondary, especially those corners.
That's right.
So, sometimes it's what Dowell doesn't say. Just saying. All right, Clayton White. Get a little Clayton in here real quick as well, Tyler. Cut 17 is interesting because we watched in the LSU game, LSU make adjustments. And those adjustments were successful against the South Carolina defense. LSU in early second quarter had 7 total yards. LSU made some adjustments. South Carolina made some adjustments. And not to be mean, it was advantage LSU because their adjustments led to offensively getting it rolling in that victory. That, and of course, the officials were obviously paid off. All right, so here is Clayton White talking about Ole Miss and the adjustments they make.
Does a lot, actually. Obviously, Kentucky did a good job of slowing the game down. That's not what Ole Miss wants to do. So I'm anticipating things to be faster. So we're trying to play the little chess game and, how can we slow it down and ways that they can make it faster. So think about it a ton. During the week of the process, think about it a lot, actually. So always trying to find ways to make sure that we're ready. We can't be surprised by certain things and ready to adjust whenever we're out there on the field and in the press box and on the sideline and iPads and mics and everything. So make sure we're on point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening there, and you got to be on point. And the other thing too is if you got to be sitting there, and if Ole Miss subs, you better be ready to sub. So your guys have to be available and locked into what's going on in case you're going to make some kind of substitution. Because if they do, they're giving you an opening.
They are.
You got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, on the flip side of that, I think you also have to be ready to just be on the field for a long time and just be prepared for maybe a 10 to 12 play drive where you don't get that breather, you don't get to have that rotation. Say, okay, it's just the nature of the game. If you're not able to slow them down enough where they are, having to make substitutions on their own or having to, go back to their playbook and figure things out, then yeah, you're going to be out there on the field for the duration of the drive probably.
So that is a thing for that tempo is a thing. But again, you play tempo against Tennessee. You play tempo this year against Old Dominion. It's not like you've never seen this. This is, like you said earlier, this is prevalent around college football. Some teams will use it at times during games, but not all the time. Like South Carolina's used some no huddle and some tempo at times this year as well. And we'll get back to some South Carolina stuff coming up as well in what's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. Okay. Well, baseball season's over.
For us, at least.
I didn't see a highlight.
Well, there wasn't one.
First inning.
I briefly thought about putting Michael Harris' home run in the 8th inning, which reinvigorated the game for a brief moment, but it was the end of it. I was like, you know what? Yeah.
I mean, Atlanta's done. Again, the Braves had a ton of injuries. The pitching just wasn't set up. Max Fried, 2 outs, bases empty. You
got out of the jam in the first.
I mean, you're like, all right, just get the third out, get back to the dugout. You're up 1-0, and then all heck broke loose.
Yeah, I know it didn't really affect him, but when he took the ball off the backside in the first inning, kind of similar to how he rolled his ankle that time, it's just like, it's going to be one of those days.
Yeah, well, you know what? I said this upstairs. I don't know if you and I were talking about it. Because, our guy at B106, Leo, is a huge baseball nerd.
Yes.
and him and I were talking about this because, my Orioles also decided to go on vacation yesterday. There's something about, as a fan, watching postseason baseball, and it's different from basketball or football or hockey or any of the other sports. You can feel when your team's going to lose. It's coming through the TV at you that the baseball gods are flipping you the bird this year in the playoffs. Guys on your team that make plays, stop making plays. Pitchers on your team that make pitches, stop making pitches. And the most frustrating part is these jobbers on the other team who never do this stuff at all of a sudden are playing like Hall of Famers. You just feel it coming through your TV, and you know what? You know when it's done. You just know when it's done, just like you get the flip side. We've all been through the flip side where, my favorite team's going to win. Why? You don't feel that?
Yeah. No. Sometimes the ball just, bounces your way. And I just think about, with the Braves, with some of the infielding they had, like Ozzie, missed on what was a pretty routine play. Urshela at third base, like one of those that bounced out of his glove, I think early on in the game. Like just really routine things that don't typically go wrong were going wrong. And you're like, yeah, it's one of those days that it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I say this about baseball all the time. And it's so much more prevalent now in the we don't care about starting pitching, we love our bullpen era. Is baseball is built on, play 6 months, right?
Yeah,
so let's just make it easy.
Sure.
You make 6 months, 4 weeks. Let's just go with 4 weeks in a month. So you're playing 24, 26 weeks of baseball. If you are one of the best teams in the game, Dodgers, Braves, whoever, you're going to have a bad week. Matter of fact, you have more than one bad week out of 24, 26. You're probably going to have 3, 4 bad weeks in the season, right?
Yep.
You are just praying to the baseball gods. None of those weeks come up in October.
Pretty much.
That's just what you're doing. And that's the thing, that's the beauty and the curse of baseball, if you're a fan, is when you're watching your team have that bad series in the worst possible time, because they've had that bad series in June.
Oh, of course.
And you're like,
nobody
whatever.
Cares.
Who cares?
Yeah.
You have that bad series in October against the team you should beat.
Yeah, it's over.
You're done. And that's the thing about baseball. And you pile on to the fact that you have made the game so much more unpredictable in October because, and look, I will die on this hill, that you have basically pulled back the importance of starting pitching. Bullpens are flaky. Bullpens are unpredictable. Bullpens from year to year. You can go through and look at year to year. I'll just take ERA. It's easiest. Year to year ERAs of bullpens. You will see wild swings. I was looking at Josh Hader's numbers just to back this up. Josh Hader's been one of the best relievers in baseball over the last, 7 years?
Mm-hmm.
Look at Josh Hader's numbers a few years ago. He's money. He's terrible. He's money. He's money. How in God's name does a guy go from unhittable one year to everybody knocking the snot out of him the next year? Bullpens. Bullpens are so unpredictable. And we have handed the game over to bullpens. So your unpredictability in October is even higher now because you have devalued the starting pitcher. Even the best starting pitchers throw 5 or 6 in the postseason.
Yeah.
So the game is flipped upside down in October just because then you throw in the unpredictability of, I hope my team doesn't have that bad week. And you get Diamondbacks Rangers. Not to be mean.
Mm-hmm.
This year, am I going to be surprised if we get Padres Royals? Padres Tigers? Of course not.
Shouldn't be.
Wouldn't be surprised one bit.
Thank God ESPN has the win probability up at the score ticker the entire game because I really need to know who's got the best chance to win in the middle of the second inning.
By the way, if your favorite team is ahead on that thing and then they lose, how much do you hate the win predict to be?
That's why they put it there because they want people to screen grab and say, oh, you had a 99% chance to win and you lost the game so it can go viral.
Exactly.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, it's aggro. I wish they'd turn that off, to be quite honest. What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Tristan's Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. Guess what? Tyreek Hill's still happy being a Dolphin. We'll talk about that next here on the halftime show in the game. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. Terry Ford, Tyler Head here on the game. So, obviously the Miami Dolphins are struggling a bit without Tua, which I find interesting that everybody gave Mike McDaniel all the credit on Tua. Look at Mike McDaniel do it, Tua. Look at that offense. Look at Mike McDaniel, Mike McDaniel, Mike McDaniel, Mike McDaniel. Offense looks a lot different without Tua.
Yeah, I think we touched on this yesterday. Mike McDaniel has not achieved the Shanahan level with his offense where you can just put seemingly anybody in that role of quarterback and be successful with it. It is definitely an offense that is tailor-made to Tua. And sorry, Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley are not Tua.
No, they're not. Together, if you sewed them together, they're not Tua. So the Miami offense has been since Tunga Vailoa went out. But all's good because Tyreek Hill doesn't want to leave.
I'm glad.
Yet.
That's good.
Tyreek Hill didn't talk to the media after Monday's slog against the Titans. Didn't speak to the media. There's been some rumors that, because Kansas City needs a wide receiver, that maybe Hill would be open to going back to Kansas City. Which the only reason he's not a Chief, to be honest, is he wanted to be the highest paid wide receiver in the game, and the Chiefs couldn't do that with their salary cap situation. Right. And Hill's still making a ton of dough. It's not like all of a sudden he's biting minimum wage. So I don't know how Hill would fit cap-wise. Again, you probably have to restructure the thing and do all sorts of stuff. But anyway, Hill spoke Wednesday after practice. Quote, I'm just focused on right here and right now. Got a beautiful team here. I want to be part of it. We've got a great situation here. My family loves it. I enjoy it. Weather's great. Fans are great. Got a beautiful situation here, man. We all ready? Here it comes. Here it comes. Ready?
Okay.
We all know the NFL is a business. Whatever happens, happens.
It's that little open-endedness at the end. He was not going to completely shut that door. We left it cracked.
Yeah.
Saying, if the opportunity presents itself, the money's right, I will leave.
Because look, I get it. Do I think that there should be a mix of I want mine, but I do have some type of loyalty that for the good and the bad, I'm here with you? I think there should be some type of combination of those things. And in the NFL, I don't get mad at guys who hold out. I don't get mad at dudes who are trying to take care of their contract situation because the NFL deals aren't guaranteed.
Yeah, you're playing a game with a career shelf life that is relatively short, all things considered. Like, yeah, get your bag while you can.
Yeah, I have no problem with that in the NFL. Zero. But it would be nice if there's some type of combination of, look, I want to collect my bags, but you know, you're paying me a big, large, gigantic, massive, hefty cinch sack bag. I'm in it with you. I'm not ready to bail the minute we get a little sideways. And look, the only reason the Dolphins are sideways is their quarterback's hurt. We see what this offense is with Tua. It's big plays with Hill, big plays with Waddle, running backs, popping off big chunks of yardage, A-chain, all sorts of numbers in the pass game and the run game. You don't have your starting quarterback. Duh. So it would be nice if you got a guy who you've, I don't know, dropped a large amount on, understands the situation, and he's with you. Not this. I love this, I love that, I love this, I love that, but hey, NFL's a business. Whatever happens, happens. Hey, honey. Yeah, sweetheart. I mean, I know I just lost my job and we're going through tough times. Sweetheart, I love you. You're beautiful. You got a great personality. You're good looking. You're a great kisser. You're a fantastic cook. You take care of me. You're very you're always looking out for me. You're wonderful. But relationships are a business.
Yeah, let me know how that one goes over.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thing. It's like, I get it. I get it, but can't you have the I'm out for me, but once you help me, I'm also here for you.
Well,
understanding your situation.
If you think there's an opportunity to be successful as a team, again, if Kansas City made him a good enough offer and he stayed there, well, yeah, you're going to stay in Kansas City because you also have the opportunity to win Super Bowls every single year. Miami is still trying to get over that hump, and they got just completely demolished by Kansas City in the playoffs last year. So you're in Miami, for the purposes of getting paid a lot and working with a team that has the potential to maybe take that next step, as opposed to being on a team like Kansas City where you wouldn't have made as much, but you would have been guaranteed to be at the top level of football.
You made the choice for you.
Yes.
And you went and became for at least, 61 seconds, the highest paid wide receiver in the league, right? Yeah. And Miami's been in the playoffs, and they've been successful since you've been there, to be fair. They're just not going to be successful this year because, again, the starting quarterback is standing on the sidelines because, once again, he's concussed. But it's not like a bunch of bad decisions were made and you cratered the franchise with owner stupidity. And no, quarterback got hurt.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
A factor outside your control.
Right. So now, again, I'm not saying this is who he is because he has told us how beautiful everything was. But you're ready to bounce. The first sign of anything, you're ready to bounce. Maybe, rumor-wise, allegedly. We'll see.
When you're as talented as he is, you can get away with saying things like that.
You can, but you shouldn't, right? Because, look, you won a Super Bowl in Kansas City. You did. But then you wanted yours. It was about you, and I got no problem with that again. But, again, if I'm giving you a lot of money, and that's why you're in Miami, because I gave you a lot of money, and you know you're going to get the ball a lot, I would love in return for you to at least hang with me for a little bit of thick and thin.
Or at least pull the wool over my eyes, right?
Yeah.
Like at least lie to me and say that you're going to stay around.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and again, Miami has to trade him. He just can't, he just can't leave. Yeah, Miami has to deal him.
That's the thing. There's enough negative around that team right now. They just need some positive reinforcement. They don't need stories about, Tyreek Hill, ready to leave at a moment's notice.
Yeah, so we'll see. Oh, by the way, to the surprise and shock of no one, this just broke a minute ago. Guess who won Rookie of the Year in the WNBA?
Caitlin Clark.
I know. How about that?
Crazy.
I mean, look, let's give her credit. She had a heck of a year. And you can hate her for whatever reason you want to. I don't have a dog in that fight. Remember, she started off, had a rough start, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of talk and chirping was going on. There were players in the WNBA jealous of everything she was getting because she hadn't earned it, right?
Right.
Well, once the dust settled a little bit and she got used to what was going on, she played pretty well. Matter of fact, she played better than pretty well. She was good. And she just had to get used to the speed of the league, the skill set of the players around her, her own teammates and the opposition. And to her credit, she just kept going, kept grinding, and came out on the other side pretty good. So nice year for Caitlin Clark, and it shut down a lot of the noise. Because here's the thing about our world today. When things aren't going well, you are in the bullseye, man. You're in the crosshairs. Every one of these hairspray heads on TV with an opinion show are lighting you up, right?
Right.
You know what they're not talking about much lately? Caitlin Clark. You know why? She's taking care of her business now, right?
Mm-hmm.
No more about this and that and the other and this and that because she had herself a heck of a rookie season. So give her props. I mean, also, hey, look, she wasn't the only one, but Rookie of the Year, yeah, she had a heck of a season. So, Caitlin Clark, Rookie of the Year in the WNBA. Oh, my God. Today's the greatest day in the history of the world. Let's talk about it next.
Yes, it is.
Let's do that. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head, here on The Game. Time for the greatest day in the history of the world here on the halftime show. We like to go old school. The oldest of old school for this day is 1951. On this day in 1951, this was historic in the game of baseball. Bobby Thompson, on this day in 1951, hit a 3-run homer off Ralph Branca of the Brooklyn Dodgers with one out in the bottom of the ninth, gave the Giants a dramatic 5-4 playoff victory and the National League pennant. You've heard the Giants won the pennant. The Giants won the pennant. Later on, we find out that there is evidence that the Brooklyn Dodgers had folks during the season, especially when they made their historic run, or the Giants, rather, when they won and made a historic run in 1951, they had people sitting in the stands with binoculars trying to steal signs. Wow, how about that? No one would ever do that. Stealing signs? No one would ever do that today. So, Bobby Thompson, the historic 3-run homer for Ralph Branca in this day in 1951. I say this all the time. Look, the Houston Astros, you get caught, you get punished. And the players should have been punished. There's no doubt for all that sign stealing, trash can banging, all that nonsense. By, watching video during games to steal signs. But this has been going on for over 100 years in baseball. Whether it's binoculars, telegraphs, whatever, there have been people trying to steal signs using the latest technology forever, and the Astros are using the latest technology. Hell, I'm surprised in a few years somebody doesn't have a drone flying around trying to steal signs. Baseball, one of the foundations of the game of baseball is cheating. Has been ever since the game first started. That's who baseball is. And then they get mad on certain forms of cheating makes baseball mad. And certain forms of cheating, they think it's cute and cuddly. But even going back to 1951, you had guys sitting in the stands with binoculars trying to steal signs. And binoculars in 1951, that was some fancy technology. All right, as we move through the greatest day in the history of the world here on the game, we'll go a little bit more to the current day. This day in 2021, Tom Brady becomes the NFL's all-time leader in career passing yards, passing Drew Brees 80,358 yards. Not saying no one can get it because, again, quarterbacks are protected more today than ever. They play longer. Could another dude at a high level, could Patrick Mahomes one day break this record? Sure. Why not? Absolutely could see it. Would not be surprising or shocking at all. A Josh Allen, maybe. But Tom Brady, 80,358 yards on this day in 2021. On this day in 2015, Max Scherzer threw his second no-hitter of that season for the Washington Nationals. Struck out 17. This is interesting. Go back to 2015, college football. Number 9 LSU beats Eastern Michigan 44-22. Leonard Fournette had his third straight 200-yard game, a 75-yard touchdown run in the contest. Fournette, 233 yards and 3 scores. First player in the history of the SEC to rush for 200-plus yards in 3 straight games. Now, Leonard Fournette had an okay NFL career. It's a solid, had some good moments, and had a good season or two. But nothing near the wrecking ball machine that he was in college at LSU. Most people thought he would be better in the NFL than he turned out to be. Also, as we spin through this day in history here on the halftime show, on the game, this day in 2004, Seattle Mariner outfielder Ichiro Suzuki finishes the season with a Major League Baseball record 262 single-season hits. 262. Ichiro was a thing. I mean, as his career progressed, he became kind of one-dimensional. When he first showed up, I was in Seattle his rookie year. That was a phenomenon. What Ichiro did was crazy, how good he was, especially early in his career. On this day in 1999, Mark McGwire hits his 65th homer of the season. wins a second straight home run title over Sammy Sosa, who hit his 63rd in the same game. And, of course, we do not speak of that time. Even though it was the most exciting time in baseball in forever. Baseball much more fun and watchable during the steroid era than people want to admit. In 1997, this is wow. 69-year-old Hall of Famer Gordie Howe skates the first shift with the Detroit Vipers in an IHL game, becoming the only professional in his sport to compete in 6 decades. Gordie Howe was a freak. A freak. And George Brett on this day in 1990 became the first player in Major League Baseball history to win a batting title in 3 different decades. Of course, George Brett played his entire career as a Kansas City Royal. 1993, this is interesting. Toronto Blue Jays became the first team in American League history to have teammates finish 1, 2, 3 in the batting race. John Olerud led the league. Paul Molitor finished second. Roberto Alomar finished third. So that's your greatest day in the history of the world. A lot of cool stuff today in the greatest day in the history of the world. All right, we focus back at South Carolina Ole Miss Saturday, again, 3:30 kickoff. We start our coverage 10:30 at the party lot at Sound and Images, right across from Williams-Price on Bluff. We've talked today a lot about, if you just jumped into the show, some things that South Carolina can do to win this football game or things to look out for. Ole Miss wants to run the ball badly. They've run for over 200 yards in every game this year except the Kentucky game. Wildcats, first of all, kept Ole Miss's offense off the field, and 2, shut down the Ole Miss running game, more than it's been shut down all year. But Ole Miss wants to run the ball, and South Carolina at times has given up yards in the run game. That's something to watch. Can South Carolina bottle up the rushing attack of Ole Miss? 2, Ole Miss will probably get the ball out quick. Ole Miss against Kentucky struggled in pass protection, especially their tackles. Well, especially their left tackle, who will be, by the way, blocking Kyle Kennard. So look for Ole Miss to get rid of it quick like LSU did and also Akron did to kind of try to neutralize the pass rush. That means tackling will be at a premium. You can't miss tackles. We talked about that today. Also, how are you going to handle the fact that Ole Miss plays a fast tempo, and if Ole Miss isn't substituting, you can't substitute. That'll be testing your depth and your substitution patterns and how you handle your business. On offense, the Ole Miss corners and linebackers struggled in coverage last week against Kentucky. If Lenore Sellers gets time to throw, can South Carolina take advantage of that with their passing offense? 2, South Carolina wants to obviously run the football. Teams have not run the ball against Ole Miss. Kentucky struggled against Ole Miss to run the ball. Can South Carolina find ways to run the football? Now, be fair, Brock Vandergriff is not Lenore Sellers. Kentucky doesn't have a back like Rocket Sanders. But also, the South Carolina offensive line, we'll see.
Yeah, there are certain areas like with Rocket, if he's fully healthy, that South Carolina definitely has the advantage compared to the other teams that Ole Miss has faced up to the point this season. But again, the offensive line play, that's what really worries me here because again, even if Princely doesn't play on Saturday, they still got very capable dudes across that defensive line that can wreak havoc. So it could be a very long day for Sellers, where as we've seen in the past, if he didn't have enough time to throw, then he can make those ill-advised throws, lead to turnovers, obviously to fumbles, things like that. That is my big concern going into Saturday.
Look, Ole Miss, I mean, they've got dudes who, what?
Ivy, Nolan,
Pegues, J.J. Pegues,
like
Warren
all
Nolan.
these guys are listed as questionable on their injury report because Lane's just being a troll. But
it is funny. I mean, we talk about you know where Jared Ivey played, right?
Yeah,
transfer
with
where Kyle Kennard played, right?
They played together.
They had those 2 guys on defense at Georgia Tech last year. Ivy's been really good against the run and the pass. Nolan's been excellent against the run. Pegues has been excellent against the run. These guys up front have talent. Can South Carolina's offensive line just be able to win enough so the Gamecocks can run the football? That's all the stuff we've been talking about today, kind of getting you ready for Saturday. All right, 803-404-6100 Firehouse Sub Text the hour. Also, we'll do our little handoff sponsored by Little Pigs on Alpine with Jay. Get the postgame show ready with Jay and Elijah. That's coming up right here on The Game. All right, time for our Firehouse Sub Text, the hour 803-404-6100. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, Jay Phillips hanging out with us. Hattie. So for you and I, we can move on to 2025 baseball now.
Well,
We're done.
Let's bring Tyler into the sadness.
Oh, that's right.
No, there's no more baseball taking place this year.
These three guys, the season's over.
Yeah, I'm not gonna just have it be on you and me. Tyler's got to bear some of it.
Tyler's got to suffer with us.
Let me ask you this: when your team is eliminated, do you still find as much interest? Because if the Falcons miss the playoffs, I'm still going to watch the NFL playoffs.
What are the Falcons? Is that a football team?
Well, they're
indoor soccer.
Hey, by the way, did you see they're bringing back the Fulton County Stadium field design for
pretty
tonight?
Cool, man.
It looks pretty good.
Cool.
All right.
I'm excited about that.
Cool.
I'll say to your point.
Is it going to have the infield dirt? Because the first time I ever went.
See,
they're going to put the infield dirt in.
Well, it was George Rogers' first pro game. Okay, so it was the fall of '81 in Atlanta. And I'd never been because I had not yet been to a Braves game. So my first ever experience at Fulton County was for the Falcon Saints.
Isn't it cool, though? Look, I know that it was terrible to play on, but it was cool to look at an NFL field with a baseball diamond right in the middle of it.
Well, I watched the Braves on TBS all the time back then, and I remember going home the next night and the Braves had a game, and I was like, "Hey, I was just there." But it was. I very much remember.
It's second down and second base.
It's just so cool.
It was.
But to your question,
yes,
I think it's about sport. Like when for example, again, You're a Bronco fan. The Broncos used to make the playoffs.
They did.
I'm a Ravens fan. You're a Falcons fan. When our teams get beat, yeah, you lose a little bit because my team's out, but you still watch the NFL playoffs.
NFL playoffs, absolutely. I will tune in here and there the rest of the way in Major League Baseball.
I will still have it on. But my focus will not be as intense on the baseball playoffs now that my favorite team's out.
And I guess that's the regionality of baseball. And, again, if you're a Braves fan, you're watching the Braves every single night. You're not usually watching a lot of games around the league outside of highlights and, cut-ins and stuff like that because it's a sport that gets played every single day. We're like football, you watch your team, but you'll watch 4 of the games on a Sunday. It's where you might have more of an interest and more of a knowledge to what's happening with these other teams. Say, hey, let me watch this AFC wildcard game instead.
It's a whole different world. The NFL and everything else is so different now. Like the example, guys, like college basketball. If your team's in the NCAA tournament and then your team gets knocked out, a lot of fans, I'm done. I'm just not interested anymore. I love the tournament, so I'll keep watching it. But I know a lot of like college basketball fans when their favorite team gets beat. They check out.
It's interesting that you say that for that particular event because around here, culturally, that's not really a part of the annual March experience.
Right.
And I don't mean that as a slam. It's just not. I wish it were, but it's not.
Right.
And it really, it hasn't been since I've been alive. So, and yet, if you're, say, a North Carolina fan or something, if you lose in the second round and you don't make the Sweet 16, you're probably
the same
like, what
vibe,
the?
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And where you grew up, UMD is not in it as often as Chapel Hill, but they're in it. They're supposed to be. So that kind of But no, I'll tune in to I'll watch Shohei play a little bit.
Yeah, I'll have it on. I'll have it on. But I won't be as invested.
No.
And like this is the way it's going. With
Only
baseball.
I'll be invested is like if the Phillies make the World Series or the Mets make the Mets aren't gonna, but the Phillies might.
Well, here's the interesting part.
I'll be pulling against them.
In a perfect world, Major League Baseball wants Dodgers, Yankees, Shohei, Judge, all that. And you know what they're going to get? Padres, Tigers. Look at Padres, Tigers.
Well, hey, that'll be. You know what? Wait.
Well,
you know what? Dead serious. 40 years ago.
Isn't
40
and the
years
Tigers
ago
won in 84.
Isn't that the funnest game to play at the beginning of October? What's the least appealing matchup to Major League Baseball with the teams in the postseason?
Of the teams that are currently left, the least appealing matchup.
Wouldn't it be Brewers like Tigers? Brewers, Tigers, Brewers, Royals.
Royals, probably.
Smaller market, Kansas City.
Because at least
Royals.
Detroit is a big city.
Right, Brewers, Royals.
And Cleveland's a pretty big city.
What do you got real quick on the Firehouse Sub text line?
Yeah, Nameless Texter says, good point. I think it's more about the wide receiver room having a breakout than worrying about young sellers being superhuman on Saturday.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see some plays being made by the wide receivers in one-on-one. Look, that Ole Miss secondary can be had, especially the corners and the backers. So hopefully the wide receivers can step up and help out.
Yeah, I'm going to get really boring the more studying I've done on this game with the classic run and stop the run.
Oh, Ole Miss wants to run it.
They do want to run.
If you don't stop them, it's a long day because they'll run
Kentucky
it and run
stopped
it and
them,
run it. Yep.
And you better.
You got to.
So,
Absolutely. What do you got coming up, friend?
We got Gamecocks and Ole Miss stuff. My buddy Greg Gaston from Memphis going to break down the Rebels for us, and Lou Lucas N from the Greenville News going to talk Gamecocks.
Sweet.
And I'll probably not cry about the Braves, but I may moan.
You'll whine a little.
I may moan
It's okay.
and whine.
Whine a little.
Yeah,
you deserve it. Tyler, good job. Post-game show's next here in the game.